If you're like me and don't have a lot of money or time to get into sim racing, it's hard to figure out which kind of simulation is the best for you and which one is actually worth your time. And this is especially hard for beginners because you just don't know what you're going to like. In this video, I created a tier list on what you can expect, but I will also mention a few things about different simulations that I did not see on any other video. So let's get into it. By the way, this video is sponsored by Trophy AI, more on that later. But before we get into a tier list and talk about different simulations, I first need to point out a problem that they all claim to be the real simulation, and they pretty much succeed and fail at them at the same time. It doesn't matter how realistic a simulation feels or is in the first time, if you go deep enough, you will find a lot of issues with every simulation. And in a way, all simulations can only disappoint in the long run. For us as consumers, it's important that we not always focus on being it realistic or not, because we'll always be disappointed that way. Now, there is one factor that influences this realism, and that is the simulation focus. If you, let's say, take Automobilista 2 or iRacing, they have a lot of cars and tracks and classes you can choose from. And if you look at, let's say, Le Mans Ultimate, they are very narrowed in on a few particular classes. So later on, I will also explain what that will mean in racing simulators. And the second issue you run into with racing simulators is this platform where you're on right now. New simulations being promoted like crazy. Influencers like myself like to explore new simulations. They talk about it a lot. They may be playing it a whole lot. And if you're clicking that, like you clicked on this video, and you keep watching that, then somehow this algorithm of social media platforms keep pushing you into this simulation, and then at some point you get the idea that this is the only simulation you can do and that's really worth playing. But that's absolutely not true. And I think the most and the best simulation of all of them is the one with the biggest player base. And that brings me to the first simulation I want to talk about, iRacing. This is probably the simulation that is the least sexy and is kind of old and it's very expensive, but it does deliver on multiplayer and online racing. Take note, I'm coming at this from a competitive standpoint. I don't really care about AI races or like single player modes. I don't care. I just want to race with other people. But iRacing has a little bit of an issue. Is there a problem with iRacing? Yes, there is a problem with iRacing. And this is going to be the most important part of the video, okay? Especially when you're starting out. Because some people getting tricked into a massive discount for membership for iRacing. So let's say near Christmas, people got like a full year membership with like half the price or like 75% of the price. This is really good because now you can get into iRacing fairly cheap because it comes with a monthly subscription. But if you ask me, that I think the head of marketing and sales of iRacing is probably used to be something like a drug dealer or something, because this is how you get hooked into iRacing. First, you get this very cheap membership. Nice. Now you can get into some basic cars and you do have like a few tracks and you can go into the UI and go for the first online races on iRacing in an MX-5 or I believe the BMW. Now, when you get into that, there's a very steep learning curve to start out with. It's very easy to lose the car on the back. It has like, you really are, for me, this is personal, you're really being like very precise with your inputs. It's very easy to overdrive the car, and the tire model is like super unforgiving. So as soon as you start pushing the car too hard, the tires heat up and you lose all control because you need to like be careful with the tires. Now, if you like this, congrats to you. You can just go into iRacing, but there's a problem. So you got your iRacing with a very cheap subscription and you get a few tracks, right? You get hooked on the drug called iRacing, and then at some point you think to yourself, you know what? I want to drive like Formula 3 or like a GT3 car, whatever. You spent already quite some time building up some ELO and safety rating for to get into higher classes, and then you need to buy some new cars. Well, that will be 15 euros, $15, whatever. Not really that of an issue, so you'll pay that. And then you think to yourself, nice, I go into my first season on iRacing. And then the little bit of the issue starts, because you will be set up in a league with, let's say, 10 tracks, and you only own 2 of them, or 1. And then you need to buy every track. But you think to yourself, you know, I have so much fun on this simulation, I will just buy that. So you buy that, and then you keep going. Now, this is great when you're racing every day and you're going into this a whole lot, then that is absolutely great. And it's impossible to go back somewhere else. And this is how they hook you into their product. Right. And again, I'm not talking negative about this, but this is just how it goes. So know that when you're starting out with iRacing. Yeah, it's like drugs. First they make you addicted, and then you need to pay. As for the tier list, this is what I really feel about iRacing. It has a massive player base. On the cost, like from a racing simulation perspective, it's very expensive. I do want to take note that I wish more simulations had a subscription. Very unpopular maybe, but at least they provide a lot. As for realism, you know, they focus on realism, but there are plenty of issues with realism, tire model, how the car feels. I even spoke with real racing drivers, that one racing driver absolutely loves it, and the other racing driver who did it for real actually hates it. So there's plenty of different opinions about. Then you got the flow and feel. Anyways, I really feel you should really use the brakes. That's a great point of iRacing, but I really feel that when I drive a whole lap, I don't really feel really active while driving iRacing. It feels more like a little bit of input, and it's already way too much. So I'm not really like fighting the car. Let's say I need to be really precise and like surgical even. As in for audio and visuals, not that great. It doesn't look very good. I will give it 3 stars anyways, because it's like acceptable. Let's keep it at that. And we have a massive list of cars and tracks you can choose from. And I think only iRacing does this well in a way, because they have such a support team and they're probably a big company, so they can actually create some depth in these different cars and come up with updates and all that stuff. Although I didn't find them very good, but that's just me. Another point I want to make, if you really have a lot of time on your hands and you don't care about money, you should test them all. But take note, don't make your favorite sim a religion. Keep an open mind, because they are all beautiful in a lot of ways. Are you ready to improve your driving, but you don't want to get into deep telemetry? Then check out Trophy AI. Trophy AI gives you feedback in real time. Even if you already know how to improve, it's nice to have an AI telling you that you're braking too early on a certain corner.
For this right corner, brake 5 meters later to improve your line. You're doing great on the right corner. Try to adjust your...
This is what happened to me on a track that I really know well. So I'm learning something from this AI. If you want to support my channel, give Trophy AI a shot. Link is down in the description. And if there is a discount code, I will put that in the pinned comment. Let's get into another wide simulation, because iRacing is a very wide simulation. Let's go into Automobilista 2. The problem with Automobilista 2 is that the player base is significantly smaller, but it's also a very wide game, creating a lot of different options for you. And that is a problem with the player base, because if you're really keen into certain specific class, it might be kind of hard to find people competing over there, right? So that's a little bit of an issue for me. As for the cost, you just pay it once and you can just go. And you have a lot of tracks and cars. And if you're into AI racing, or you have like, bro, you want to have a lot of options, this is absolutely awesome. Everything is in here. As for realism, again, very subjective, but I believe like Automobilist has a safety car. That's cool. So as for flow and feel, the cars feel a little bit floaty. With the newest update 1.6, I found it, I don't know, it's just not my thing. As for audio and visuals, especially in VR, this is absolutely awesome. And the cars and tracks, you have so much choice. You can experience everything there. But as for the depth on like how deep and like there's a lot of attention to certain car and classes, I feel this game is more on the surface. And I don't want to offend anyone, but Automobilista 2 feels like when I go to the club or like a bar and I see a really hot blonde with nice cleavage, I'm like, you know, I'm gonna cheat on my wife. I'm gonna go for this girl, and yes. And then you wake up the next morning and you're kind of like, what did I do? And that is my experience with buying all the DLCs for Automobilista 2. I really got excited when I started. I was like, yes, this is fun and everything is gonna be in here, all these tracks and cars. But yeah, I didn't stick with me somehow. Now the next sim, that is my personal favorite still, also for this year, and I will tell you why. First, we need to talk about the player base of ACC. It is more spread out. If you look at low fuel motorsport, the splits are not being as full as they used to be. But every time when I get into the simulation, there are still plenty of drivers where I can compete against. Also on the pit skill, but also on different communities. And if you look at the Steam charts and how much this game is played, it is absolutely insane. And what I also found, and this is a little bit of that influencer problem, not so long ago, people told me that, hey man, why are you focusing on ACC? It's dead. What? I look at my own data from my YouTube channel and I see like a few weeks before Christmas, I never got so much views on beginner tutorials on Assetto Corsa Competizione. And this is also the influencer problem, because some guys will just play something new or they get into different simulations, and these guys, when you play Assetto Corsa Competizione or iRacing, I don't know, the older sims, you might be ready for something new, right? But if you're new to sim racing, this is amazing, because you will feel, the first time I started up, I was like, oh my god, I want to keep doing this and doing this and doing this. But what happens is when you're new, you go into the YouTube or articles or whatever, and you see people complaining about this game because they're already playing it for 5 years. And that is also because when you go a mile deep, and they went a mile deep, they see all the skeletons there and things that are wrong with the sim. And they will point it out to you. And here you are getting infected by it, right? But if you're new, this is great because everything works, right? And you have communities and you have videos and tutorials and settings. It's all there. So you can just enjoy it instead of figuring out the force feedback settings all the time. Now, as for cost, DLCs and the whole package, it's a no-brainer. It's really cheap. I wish they had some sort of a pro subscription so they can fund themselves, create more of a bigger team, and then create more tracks and cars or whatever. I don't know how that works actually, but like my father-in-law used to say that it's better be very expensive than not available. So that is a little bit of a thing with Assetto Corsa Competizione. As for realism, I really find this realistic. There are a lot of things that really behave realistically. Also, there are parts of the sim that are not really realistic. Again, you wanna kind of ignore that a little bit in every sim. Flow and visuals, a lot of like the flow and feel, it really feels nice, but then again, it's very subjective. I've seen people, they absolutely hate it, and absolutely people love it. So yeah, you're gonna have to try that out, but I think it's great. As for audio and visuals, that is also really good, but the reason why it's not getting a 5-star is because it's very heavy on systems. It's absolutely not greatly optimized for lower end PCs, and VR it's always also kind of a nightmare always. So that is really why it doesn't get 5 stars, but it does look really good. Now, the cars and tracks I give 2 stars, because if you want to drive Formula cars, it's no point. But also, if you want to drive GT2 or GT4 cars, you're not gonna really find some people there. So this sim focus narrowly on GT3. For me, that is not a problem, because I always was focusing on GT3 cars. Again, if you're starting out sim racing and you're doing this like a few hours a week, I think this is the one. And I also have a massive playlist on different settings, know-hows. I have different beginner setups. I have ghost packs. I even launched a car setup builder course that you're gonna do in Assetto Corsa Competizione, and then you can cross that over into different simulations to learn car setups once and for all, because they kind of difficult, right? Now, a little bit of a driver feel difference if you compare iRacing to Assetto Corsa Competizione. They're both extremes in a way. In iRacing, you don't have to touch the steering wheel like at all sometimes, and on Assetto Corsa you really need to be aggressive with changes, braking, throttle, to the point that some people say, okay, this is not realistic, but you do take a very active role in driving it, and that is for me the thing that makes it stick. I am so much responsible for what happens to the car, and this is what I really like about this sim. So we covered iRacing, Automobilista and Assetto Corsa Competizione. I was very limited on Automobilista 2 because I did not play that a whole lot. And that is also the mention about Race Room, R Factor, and maybe I'm leaving some other simulation out because I don't have that much experience with them, but I don't focus on them because their player bases are even smaller than the ones that I am telling. Now, the next one we need to get into, I really don't want to get into it, but I feel that you should know. So you have Le Mans Ultimate. That is the beta version, right? This game is not finished. It's full of bugs and stuff that isn't working. That doesn't mean the team of Le Mans Ultimate is working very hard to fix it, but still, it's too new. There's so much stuff changing, and I have people ask me, hey man, can you make a setup tutorial? And I'm like, yeah, but what if the game changes and feedback settings change and UI changes? It's so time consuming, and the reason why I don't get into community races with Le Mans Ultimate, I don't want to have that 20% of my followers cannot join a community race because it's some bug, right? But I will say that this sim is absolutely awesome. Why? Because it has a narrow and deep focus on its tire model. And just a little bit of a story here. When I'm driving the hypercar and I go out on track, the force feedback, I really need to get used to that. But if you warm up the tires real gently and you prevent lockups, the tire is gonna come at you. You're gonna have, at some point, you're gonna have the proper temperatures and you can really feel a connection with the car, right? Only in the slow corners, I really lack some feeling, but overall, the way that you're gonna treat the tires in this game are going to be so important, especially in the longer stints. So this depth, I didn't feel in iRacing, I didn't feel in Assetto Corsa Competizione, I absolutely did not feel that in Automobilista, but this game does. And why is that? Because it's narrow. Their engine, and I don't know how simulations are built up, but I can just know if you're focusing very hardly on a few particular cars, you can create a good tire model and a great suspension, engine, whatever, optimize it for these different cars properly. Instead of trying to use one engine and spread it out over 500 cars. How accurate is that gonna feel for every car? It needs to work for every car. But with Le Mans Ultimate, it needs to work for a GT3, LMDH and an LMP2 car. Like, that's it. So this is the list. I look at it. So as for the cost, yeah, it's beta, I'm paying a monthly subscription, but at least I don't get to pay for every other track I'm driving or a car that I'm driving. It's just the beta access you pay and the subscription model. And I don't see a problem with subscription models. If you want to support them, they need the money, right? Everybody needs money. I need money. So that's why I have to sponsor the video, right? I kind of don't want to eat out of a dumpster. And so they also don't want to do that, probably. So if it's good, we'll pay. And if it's not good, then we don't pay. As again, cars and tracks, very limited. Only 1.5 star. Obviously, if you're going to love LMP2 cars, I do. If you love hypercars, I do. I love GT3 cars. Then yeah, I like this sim a lot. And I hope they finish it up soon so we can actually get into endurances and proper community races. Assetto Corsa Evo. Yeah, what to do? This could be a sleeping giant. Why? Because this is the developers of Kunos are really smart people. And the few laps that I did on Assetto Corsa Evo felt absolutely great, but I wouldn't focus on it because it's even worse than Le Mans Ultimate. And it's not worse in the sense of that it's buggy or whatever, but it's worse in the sense of that game is not nearly finished. And I also have a little bit of a problem and an issue and a concern for Assetto Corsa Evo because they are trying to please everyone with this open world, with race car racing on different tracks, a driver academy, which I don't care about, an open world which I don't care about. I only care about the real racing and the depth of it. And I really feel, although I don't want to talk down to Kunos, I think they're like the smartest people of them all, but how can you focus a mile deep on circuit racing and simulation while you also want to try to have this massive open world with a lot of different cars and still claim to have real racing simulation? But again, maybe they're gonna surprise us all, let's hope. But I really believe that they are the ones that can actually pull it off. But yeah, I'm like, that's really no telling how that's gonna end. So what to take from this video then? Well, if you are a beginner, a newbie, and you want to get into sim racing, you want to pick the first 3 of this list: iRacing, Automobilista, or Assetto Corsa Competizione, because they have a decent player base with communities, and iRacing has its own platform. You can race there every day to get experience, but a Le Mans Ultimate and Assetto Corsa Evo, this is gonna take time. So I really want you to think about that when you're seeing a lot of Evo and Le Mans Ultimate gameplay, because it's just not finished. And especially when you're new, you're gonna have so much fun in the older simulations. Thanks for watching.